Welcome to Igniting the Spark. I'm your host, Stephanie James. Listeners, I am so absolutely thrilled today to have you with us for this conversation. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Tom Campbell. And Tom has worked as a physicist in technology development and complex system risk analysis for both government and industry. In addition, he championed far more than 50 years the scientific and drug free research into altered states of consciousness. This unique combination enabled him to develop My Big Toe, which he has as a trilogy, a scientific model of reality based on the insight that consciousness, not matter, is fundamental to all existence. So excited to welcome you to the show, Tom. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. My pleasure to be here.
Well, and so for people who aren't familiar, Tom, tell us a little bit, if you will, about what the big toe theory actually is.
Well, what it is just what it sounds like. A toe is the theory of everything. That acronym was coined by Albert Einstein, who was trying very hard to create a theory of everything, but he was stopped, as were all the founding fathers of quantum physics. They all worked together. They were all they were all friends working together back in the early 1920s. And they realized that consciousness was fundamental. It was at the root of what was going on because in their quantum physics experiments, they had this observer effect that said the observer, the consciousness that is doing the experiment affects the experiment. It's what that experimenter knows determines on how the experiment comes out. So it was all about information. And of course, information is about consciousness. That's what consciousness is. It's an information system. And that's easy to understand because what are we conscious of? What are we aware of? Well, it's our five senses. We're aware of what we see, hear, smell, taste, feel, and hear. And that's it. If you took those sensors away, you would just be kind of the Descartes moment of I think, therefore I am. You wouldn't have any physical world at all. You'd just be consciousness. So, in any case, the toe is a theory of everything. And once you understand that consciousness is fundamental, then everything else becomes much simpler. And the physicists have for the last probably 25 years come to the conclusions that our reality is information based. And most physicists, particularly those that are in particle physics and the ones that are in theoretical quantum physics, they will come to the conclusion it's about information. But they don't know where to take that. Okay, reality is information based. Now what? Well, there's a few things that might lead to, and the one that's most obvious is if this is an information based reality, it's a computed reality. Computers, are information systems. They compute things. So at least it says that this reality is computable if it's information based. And that kind of leads us to the idea of it being a virtual reality, a computed reality, a simulated reality. And the physicists take that so seriously that is one of their prime areas of study now is what they call the simulation hypothesis. And I wrote a paper back in 2017 with a set of experiments, quantum physics experiments, that would lend a lot of evidence to this idea that consciousness is fundamental and that this is a virtual reality. And we tried to do those experiments, but we couldn't get them done. There were some things about them that weren't able to do in the physical world. The experiments weren't up being able to do that yet. They had to be able to get what they call the which way data, which way which slit the particle goes through without actually touching the particle or interacting with it in any way. And that was just too hard to do. Now, one day we'll probably be able to do that. But, so for now. But anyway, so this idea that consciousness is fundamental has been, alive in science for a long time, starting 100 years ago with all the founders of quantum physics. They got that, but then it kind of got lost because the scientists didn't know what to do with it. So it kind of got pushed under the table because, all right, this is a virtual reality. Then you have to answer the question, where is it coming from? Where's the source? Who's the programmer? What? And the physicists didn't want to go there. That's starting to sound more like religion. And it's not a place they feel very comfortable. So they get right up to the brink and say it's information based, but they're not going to take the next step into what that means. Well, I was lucky enough as a young physicist to run into Robert Monroe, spent, probably 15 to 20 hours a week with him for over 8 years, and learned how to uh, get into altered states of consciousness, learn how to do all the paranormal things, learn how to, talk mind to mind, to remote view, healing, and just all those things that are capable, they're real things. It's just things that consciousness can do. But being the scientist that I am, I wanted to understand, how do they work? Why do they work that way? What are their limitations? What else can you do that nobody knows about yet? What's the underlying physics of consciousness? So I spent about 35 years trying to solve that problem because I could get into an altered state of consciousness. I could get out of this reality into the reality of consciousness very easily. And I could do it precisely so that I could do research there. In other words, change a variable and then see how that affected, say, your ability to remote view. Change another variable, change a variable a little more. Well, there's lots of variables, so it takes a lot of time to go through, all the variables and how each one of them affects the whole and so on. But I very quickly came to the conclusion that consciousness is fundamental because there's lots of things I could do from consciousness that would affect the physical reality. But there's nothing that could be done from the physical reality that would fundamentally affect consciousness. That means the arrow of causality has to run from consciousness to the physical reality, not the other way around. Therefore, consciousness is fundamental means consciousness is the source. It's the source of everything. And if we look at the idea that consciousness is an information system, like we talked about earlier, then we can see what I call the larger consciousness system, which is the big system of consciousness. That's what we're a piece of. We're a piece of this larger consciousness system. And indeed, the old saying about we're all one's actually true. We are all one. We're all a piece of this larger consciousness system. And then, of course, it turns out that this larger consciousness system just happens to have all the attributes that the PhDs in theology attribute to God. So now we have a model of what's God and where does God come from, and why is the New Testament all about love and the Old Testament about an angry, jealous God that'll turn you into a pillar of salt? What changed there and why? So again, once you understand how reality works, it's just everything falls into place. I can derive quantum physics, understand it in a fundamental way that it's not weird science, it's very rational science. So the physicists can't do that yet. They don't understand. They're still working from a belief in a material reality, that the world at its basis is material stuff. And quantum physics kind of disagrees with that. Quantum physics has the reality is based on probability. And of course, that confuses people. How is it that the physical world's based on probability? But that's the nature of quantum physics. But they don't know how or why that takes place. They have this thing called uh, the the wave function collapses to a physical particle. That's how they describe this transmission from probability space to a physical space. But of course, that doesn't make any sense. Wave function is just mathematics. Mathematics is equations in a computer. Equations in a computer do not transform into physical particles. It just doesn't make any sense. But it is the best metaphor that they can come up with because it kind of seems like something like that's not happening. But once you understand consciousness is fundamental, I can tell them exactly why that happens, what the mechanism is, how that works. So scientists don't understand why the speed of light's a constant. It's just always a constant. It's either zero or it's what we call c, a very large number for the speed of light. And that's it. There's nothing in between. It always travels at c. And nothing else is like that but light. So it's a very unusual property. And Albert Einstein really started his whole concept of relativity based on one idea, and that's the speed of light's a constant. Well, once you understand consciousness is fundamental, I can easily explain why the speed of light's a constant. It's just a very trivial, simple explanation. So that's what I mean by a theory of everything. It's basically the idea that reality is computed. This is a virtual reality. Consciousness is the computer. We are pieces of consciousness, you and I and everybody else, and all the dogs and cats and squirrels as well, are all individuated units of consciousness, little pieces of consciousness that belong to or are parts of this larger consciousness system. And we're here for a reason. This virtual reality has a reason. It has a purpose. And that is we evolve by lowering our entropy. And that's a physics term. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So when you lower your entropy, you're getting away from disorder into more order. If you're an information system and all your bits are random, you have no order at all. That's what random means. And there's no information. If you order those bits, therefore lowering the entropy of the system, you create information. The ordering of bits could be a symbol of something, a number or a letter or just counting, mathematics. So you create information when you order bits. So lowering entropy is how information systems evolve. Well, when you take that idea of lowering entropy and put it into a social system, so now you have a bunch of individuated units of consciousness interacting with each other. How do you lower entropy? How do you go from more chaos to less chaos, more disorder to more order? Well, it's through caring. It's through cooperation. It's helping each other. It's, you know, compassion. These are the things that help build connection. These are the things that allows a group of people to optimize what they can produce. Now, on the other side, I'd call that love. So consciousness evolves toward lower entropy, evolves toward becoming love. On the opposite side, you have fear, and fear is high entropy. When you have fear, that causes problems, it causes issues, it tears things apart, it is dysfunctional, and fear leads to things like ego and beliefs and a lot of bad behavior that is dysfunctional. Basically, makes your life worse and everybody around you's life worse. Their lives worse as well. So that's the high entropy path. That's de-evolution of consciousness. So we're here in this virtual reality game called the physical universe, and we're playing these parts, these avatars of human beings who evolved here. And that's another story, exactly how the humans get here. But we're playing these avatars, and our whole purpose is making choices toward love and not making choices toward fear. That's what we're here for, because that evolves the quality of consciousness. That's how consciousness evolves. And without a virtual reality like this that creates so many wonderful choices, so many challenging choices as we have here, it's kind of hard to evolve if you're just a bunch of individuated unit of consciousness in a big chat room. Yeah, you can chat with each other, but there's just not a lot of really meaningful, challenging choices there. So you create this virtual reality, let the pieces of consciousness play avatars in this virtual reality. And now there's life and death and good and bad, and all of the choices that really matter are all right there in front of you. So this is a schoolhouse, this virtual reality we call Earth. And we're here to learn, to grow up, to become love. So that's kind of the basis idea of this. And it solves a lot of problems in physics, a lot of the, well, all of the paradoxes in physics. You know, things the physicists know are true because their experiments show that this is true, but they have no idea why that's true. It's a paradox. Well, all of those just fall out with very simple answers, very straightforward answers. So it's a better physics. It's a more general, more complete physics than the one we have now. And it also creates a not only a better science of the objective, but it creates a science of the subjective as well. So now if you want to know, why am I unhappy? Why am I always struggling through life? It will tell you. There's a there's logic to why you're like that. And of course it has to do with choosing fear rather than choosing love. That's what it's going to boil down to. That's what the problem is. But then you can see exactly why things like be here now and, live in the moment. You can see when you hear these phrases, it's like, ah, well, that sounds nice. But what does that really mean? Well, once you understand how reality works, you know exactly what that means, what being present means, what being authentic means. It's the first step to growing up. You can't change who you are until you know who you are, until you embrace who you are. Because if you really don't know who you are, how are you going to change yourself? You wouldn't know how or what direction or anything. So becoming authentic is like step one. So you suddenly see how all these things that are kind of in our reality that we know are true, then suddenly they all become part of a science, a bigger science of reality that then explains the world and how it works and why it works that way. It makes all the paranormal things just normal. They're just normal attributes of consciousness. There's no para involved. It's just part of being consciousness. So anyway, a short run over the whole world. That's what it's like. So this really is a theory of everything, everything physical, everything non-physical, everything objective and everything subjective. And I've been looking for a long time for things that don't fit, for things, I'm a scientist. I not only come up with a theory, but I want to crash the theory as well. I want to see what's wrong with it. Where doesn't it fit? What doesn't it explain? And I spent almost 20 years before I went from this is a theory of everything to this is the theory of everything. There was about 20 years of research that took me from an A to a V because I'm careful. I don't like to make claims that there might be, a problem with them. And after those 20 years, I couldn't find anything that wasn't made clearer by this understanding. And it adds no new paradoxes. It doesn't create any paradoxes or unknowns. It solves problems in all the sciences, all the social sciences, philosophy, metaphysics, even theology. It solves these things we know, but we don't really know why or how. What was the force that made it be that way? Why do we have an angry, jealous God and then a God of love? How did that turn around? Supposedly, same God, just different name, maybe from Yahweh to Jehoshaphat to some other names, but it's all the same entity. So, what's that all about? So, lots of unknowns, lots of paradoxes, things we don't understand, and this answers them all. So, it is indeed a theory of everything, and I think that in the I call it near future, but that means a decade or two to me, near future. I think physics will adopt it as a better physics. I think it's the next big paradigm shift that the physicists have been waiting for since 100 years ago in the 1920s, because quantum physics just threw a grenade under the tent of physics and said, it's not like you think. And the physicists then realized they would need to have a whole new viewpoint, a new paradigm of reality in order to understand what this was all about. And this idea that consciousness is fundamental is that new paradigm of what reality is all about. And because it's just better physics and better science, it will one day rise to the top and it will one day be accepted as the next big paradigm shift in science. The first paradigm shift was what the Earth was not the center of the universe. That took about 400 years for people actually accepted that. The next big one was that the Earth was round, not flat. That took about 200 years after there was plenty of objective data around to show that it was round. And there was lots of data. If you were just rational, you would have come to of course it's round. It has to be round. Ships, when they go away from the dock, they just seem to sink. You see the whole ship, then you just see the top half of the ship, then you just see the mast, then you just see the flag on top, and then it disappears. Well, that's not the way it would happen if it were flat. The whole thing would just get smaller and smaller and smaller, but it doesn't. It disappears because you're going around a curve. So there was lots of evidence that the moon, gets shaded with a curve, not with a straight line. There's just a whole bunch of evidence that showed that the Earth was round. But 200 years it took before that paradigm shift was accepted by, say, the general public. And this, so that's half the time of the first paradigm shift. So this paradigm shift is going to be much bigger than those other two added together and multiplied by 10. This is the big one. And because it completely alters the way we think of reality, not just our place in it or where the stars are, but our place. Who are we and why are we here? So it's a big paradigm shift, and it produces better science, and it's going to produce better technology as well. So I think within the decade, maybe sooner, maybe within 4 or 5 years, maybe as long as a decade or two, physics will eventually accept that as the truth and let their idea of materialism go. And the reason that's so important is that materialism comes with its own ethic. If you believe that the world is just material, then that material is just there for anybody to do whatever they want with. So if you have the means, if you have the power, then you can just grab whatever that you want, and now it's yours. You own it, as long as you have the power to hold it so nobody takes it away from you. So the whole ethic of materialism is control, power, force. That's the ethic of materialism. In a material world, that's how things work. The big animals eat the little animals, who eat smaller animals yet, who eat grass and so on. So it's that big dominates small, powerful dominates the weak, the rich dominate the poor. All of this is based on an ethic of control, power, force. And what is the one thing that really is the poster child for this ethic? Well, it's money. What is money? Money is a way of getting control, power, and force. If you have a lot of money, you have control, power, and you can exert force where you want to get what you want when you want it. So that's why our lives kind of operate around money, because the ethic that's in our culture, it's just a cultural belief that this is a material reality, and therefore control, power, force is just life. It's the way it is. No sense fighting it. The strong will always dominate the weak and so on. That's just the nature of reality. That's not true. The nature of reality is love. It's caring. It's sharing. It's compassion. That is the nature of reality. So once the scientists make that shift from this being a material-based reality to a consciousness, its fundamental reality, then the ethic will shift, and people will see that Control, power, force is not it at all. That was a mistake. It's just not true. The world doesn't work that way. That's not about the reality. That's about what we've made of this reality. That's how we have interpreted, but that's not the way it is. And suddenly the idea of sharing, caring, cooperation will be the thing that we aspire to, not how much stuff can we get and how much money can we make and how much power can we accumulate, but how much help can we give? How much can we contribute, to others? That will be the measure of success. That's how you'll get to be somebody important, is by what you contribute and what you give, not the power you have to force your way, in the world. So, obviously we need that. That's a space we need to get in, and it won't change until that ethic changes. As long as control, power, force is what our culture believes is the way the world is, we'll always have what we have now, which is, people trying to take advantage of each other for their own benefit, kind of an institutional self-centeredness, if you like. But what you'll have once the scientists say, yes, this is true, this is a virtual reality, we are pieces of consciousness, consciousness is fundamental, then the whole ethic changes. Now the person who's powerful, if you will, is the one who has more to give. It's the one who can teach. It's the one who can care and help, not the one that has the ability to kick somebody else off their land. It's, their land. What is their land? How did it become theirs? Well, so it's this shift in our basic ethic is the important thing. That's more important than the science. It's really more important than the new physics. It's really the most important thing about this idea is the ethic that comes with it and how that will change humanity. And even if only 10% of the population gets it, that 10% will convert the other 90% in a decade because it works. When love is what you're about, your life is so much better. You're happy, things happen. Anything you need falls at your feet just as you need it. You don't want for anything. Nothing makes you angry. You're never upset. You're not self-centered. It's not about you. It's not what's in it for me. It's how can I help? And you become a happy person, fulfilled, satisfied. So when the other, 90% see that 10%, you know, living so well and being so happy, they'll want to join too. So I think the whole thing will eventually, I don't know how long, 10, 20, 30 years, something like that. It'll take a while. But I think we're going to get to that place where we'll have a very kind, supportive, caring population, humanity, not just little pieces of humanity. We have that now, but humanity in general is going to grow up. But first, in order to get there, we have to go through this big paradigm shift of understanding the nature of reality. All right. Now, I've talked a long time. I haven't given you a chance to ask questions. But you asked me what it was all about. That's what it's all about.
That's so helpful, and what's interesting to me, Tom, is you're speaking to me, it's resonating with me at such a soul level, at such a heart level, not an intellectual level. I mean, yes, intellectually, I can understand it, but
Mhm.
there's something about when the truth is being spoken at such a deep soul level, I feel that resonance, um, and so and I've felt this within my core for a long time about this tipping point coming that you're
Mhm.
speaking of. And that I love how hopeful that is because it is not about 51% being the tipping point. It's literally, I have heard this, the 10%, when
Yeah.
10% of any given cohort has a change in consciousness, the rest of the cohort has to adjust. And I remember about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, talking with Stephanie Schwartz, about this, who was also a
Mhm.
wonderful research scientist you may know of. And one of my questions though, Tom, is as I was thinking about your work and am familiar with your work and this this virtual reality that we're a part of, the simulation.
Mhm.
And in thinking of that, thinking about free will or thinking about also things that may or may not be quote unquote predestined. And
Mhm.
let me give you a little context for this. A couple years ago, I had a very clear dream where I was given in the dream downloads or ideas about the
Mhm.
universe. And one of those ideas was that when we come into this world, our soul chooses some of these preset things that we might even think of as like a preset alarm through our life. That maybe it's a catastrophe, or maybe it's the divorce, or maybe, it's the car wreck, and that those are places where it's like an alarm goes off and we're given the opportunity to wake up, to be given even more, an experience of consciousness or doing things differently. We can also just press the snooze and go back to sleep.
Mhm.
But I found that dream so fascinating about how are we players, if you will, in this virtual reality, and how much of
Mhm.
it is kind of our soul already setting that up for us as we're in this school of life.
Okay, well, I can comment on that. Education has to come kind of one thing at a time. You can't learn B until you've already learned A. You can't go into algebra if you can't add, subtract and divide. You need to learn the basics before you get in the next step and the next step. So learning can't be done all at once. It's not like you can go to school and walk out with, a PhD, in a year because you can't just learn it all, even if you have the capacity for that. You have to swallow, digest, and really get A before you move to B, before you move to C. So because learning is a serial process more than a parallel process, that means it takes a lot of time, particularly when what you're learning is very difficult. What we're here to learn is to become love. And in order to do that, you have to change who you are. It's not an intellectual process at all. It's deeper than that. Some people would say it's a heart process or, but it's a process, I say, at the being level. You change who you are at your core, and you're no longer the same person. When you do that, moving toward love away from fear, you're a different person. You've lowered your entropy. Your quality of consciousness is raised. And you're not going to figure all this out in a lifetime. So you're going to have, it's a hard thing to do to change yourself. And you've got a long way to go from very self centered to, very giving and other centered. So it's going to take many lifetimes to do that. And the way it works that in the beginning, when you're just new here and you haven't been around many cycles, it's a jump in, jump out. You jump in, you have a life, you come out, you jump back in for another one. You're male, you're female, you're rich, you're poor. You just need experience. So the whole thing is to get experience. But then after you've been around and you've got some experience, now you have some very specific things you need to work on. Oh, in the last 10, I call them experience packets. So, the Hindus call them reincarnation. But, in the last 10 experience packets, you have had real big anger management problems. So now you're thinking, what can I do to get over that? So now you may come up with some very specific things that you think will help you, will challenge you to fix that. Now, this is what you're talking about. You can come back with a plan and you can say, all right, anger management is what I need to learn here. How am I going to do that? And you come up with a plan, and a plan may involve other people. It doesn't have to be just you on your own. And you may find people you work together real well. But in any case, yes, sometimes it is planned that you have a something to do, some connection to make, some event to experience, because that's going to help you grow in the way you need to grow. But then you also eventually kind of get past that. You get the things you mostly need. You don't have anger management problems anymore. And now what you do is you come back mainly to teach, to help, to encourage others to become authentic and to grow and to lower their entropy and become love. And the more you grow up, the more effective a teacher you become. So you go through these kind of 3 stages of jump in, jump out. Ah, I've got special things I need to learn this time, so how can I best learn them? And all right, now I'm just getting better and better, lower and lower entropy, making myself more and more valuable to be effective with others. And when I say being a teacher, I don't mean you have to stand up in a stadium and talk to 100,000 people. You might just be a little old lady on a corner that just goes out and talks to the children when they get out of school. And you're just real sweet and nice with everybody and full of kindness. That may be, your teaching may just be an example of what love feels like. So, that's, what you're saying is true. That can happen. But it probably, if you take the whole, it probably is not the major part of what's going on. But it definitely does happen in that middle section where you are trying to learn specific skill sets or specific, not even, it's not really skills, specific things to change yourself, who you are. Maybe you've been acting kind, and that's nice, but that doesn't get you very far down the evolution path. You have to be kind, not just act kind. If acting comes from the intellect, oh, I should be kind here because people will see me and I'll get credit for being a kind person, or I'll be known as a kind person, and that's a good thing. That's intellect, and you're being kind for your own purpose. And it's not just to help people because you are kind. It's because it's something that you feel like you should be. And it may be well intentioned. I really should be more kind. So I'm just going to try to be more kind. But that's still in the intellect. There's a transition there where you actually become kind. And then when you get to that point, you don't have to think about it. You just are that. It just happens. It's who you are. It just comes out. You see somebody that needs help, you just help them. You don't think about, should I help? Should I get involved? Should I do this? Who's watching? Who isn't watching? How much time do I have? How late will I be from work? You are kind, and kindness is important, and you just live it. You don't do it. Growing up is not about doing, it's about being. So so yes, you're right. So I would say that, there is that section wherein people do that. Sometimes they'll come with other people who will be that person who challenges them to grow, and in ways helps them to grow. But the whole point of this is the system is also trying to help you because you are part of that system. So if you evolve the quality of your consciousness, the whole system's consciousness goes up just a little bit because you're part of it. It's you. The larger conscious system. You're a piece of that. So your evolution counts toward its evolution. So it has an incentive to help you if you are open to growth. If you're open to bigger ideas, the system will be there. Synchronicities will start happening to you. Things will start falling into place. That book you need to read that will give you that idea that you need to have will just fall off the shelf and land on your toe, so you can't ignore it. Life will just bring you the answers you need as you're ready for them. But let's say you're not ready. If something abnormal, some synchronicity happens, you just pass it off as a strange event, or you deny it that it ever happened, or you think, oh, that's just a very bizarre luck or something, and you wouldn't pay any attention to it, so you don't grow from it. For people like that who are not ready, the system does not spend a lot of time trying to encourage them because they're just not ready to grow. You can't force someone. The person has to grow on their own. We have free will. You mentioned that word. You can't abrogate anybody's free will. You can't say, listen, here's what you need to do. It's not about doing. And if you say, listen, here's what you need to be, that's not helpful. A person has to be that from the inside out. They have to grow to it. So you never override anybody's free will. You always have to let people be who they are. They grow up when they're ready. You may help them just a little by giving them an environment of love, which is kind of safety. So if they make a mistake, they're okay. But mostly you can maybe point some directions, but you can't really help people grow up. You can lecture to people and explain things to them, but they have to take that out of their intellect and into their being level and change themselves. Then they've lowered their entropy and they've grown up. And that's a lot harder thing to do. Many people take this in intellectually. Oh yeah, I get it. Uh-huh. But it's not at the level of, of their being level. It's not really them yet. They're not being it. They're just understanding the kind of the process, but they're not living the process yet. And there's a real big gap there. There's, probably hundreds of millions of people who are trying through their intellects to be better people. But it's probably a smaller percentage of those that actually are changing who they are.
Well, and as a psychotherapist, Tom, I've seen this, in the decades that I've worked in private practice, and the same
Mhm.
thing that people come in, and sometimes we laugh in couples therapy, it's the dragger and the draggee that
Mhm.
end
Mhm.
up coming into therapy, and it is only when the person, as you're saying, is truly ready to change, that you see those kind of internal, it's not just an intellectual, as you said, understanding, let's say, of
Mhm.
why this works, or even understanding one another. It's how that's integrated, how that's assimilated.
Right.
And that leads to this incredible, it can really aid in that evolution, and it's slow. It's not, there's not a lot of
Mhm.
quick fixes. It's not a lot.
Right.
Oh, I
Mm-mm.
intellectually get it, so now I'm gonna start changing my behavior and
Yeah.
heal.
No, it doesn't work. You may change your behavior for a few days or even a few weeks, but basically you are who you are and it always comes out. And you never fix a relationship by fixing the other person. You always fix a relationship by fixing yourself. You are the only person you can change. So take responsibility for all of your own stuff. Like if you get angry, it's not, oh, George made me angry.
That's
It's
right.
no, I have to be responsible. I chose my reaction to what George did. I chose it to be anger. It's my responsibility. It's not George's fault. George may have offered the trigger, but I'm the one that chose how to be angry. So once you take responsibility for yourself and for all the things that are kind of negative in your life, you realize that you've created most of those negative things in your life. And, that's one of the paranormal things. If you are very positive, you create positive things in your life. If you're negative, you'll create negative things in your life. If you're very fearful, you tend to create what you fear.
Yeah.
So it's your own mind is a very powerful tool.
Well, and so this is an interesting question for you then, which I think is really true. I would say personally, I have a very high baseline of joy that I operate out of, and am a very
Mhm.
positive, optimistic person. And yet, as all of us who have gone through life, nobody gets out of childhood unscathed. None of us go through life unscathed. And when we have these patterns, let's say things that have happened to us when we were children that might become
Mhm.
even internalized, unconscious, negative,
Sure.
and then we become more aware of them and we see them playing out, let's say, in our life, something where we get triggered or where we get hooked.
Mhm.
How would you say then, are we able to, even if, it's like people will come into therapy and say, I have worked on this for so long. I've done all these different modalities
Mhm.
of healing, whether it's EMDR trauma work or whether it's even some spiritual healings. I've worked with a shaman, I've done these things. And yet this one thing, it's like this life lesson, I guess, that keeps rotating around
Mhm.
the spiral and keeps coming back. How, with that much awareness, can people evolve, if you will, past
Mhm.
something like that?
Okay, the problem that they're having is that they think they can overcome the problem by doing. Okay, they're gonna talk to the right person, they're gonna, get the right direction, somebody gave them the magic words and so on. They're going to swallow the right pill, they'll take Prozac or something, they're going to do something, and that will change them. Once they get that information or get that thing, then that will change them, but the only way to change is by changing yourself. You gotta change who you are. Change doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. So these people are searching intellectually for a solution, but the only solution that'll work is one that's internal, not one that's external. Solution must come from inside them, not from a better, a better pill or a better thing to follow, a better philosophy. It doesn't really come from that. Oh, those better philosophies might lead you to a better understanding. That's possible, but that's because you're ready. It's you that's really, okay, you get within that philosophy, but if you're just the next little step away from having the realization of how you have to change, then yes, that new thing, whatever it is, might help you take that last little step. But if you're 2 or 3 steps away from that, then you can do therapy after therapy after therapy and still not get anywhere because you're not really quite ready inside to change. You don't really see the problem as you.
Mm,
You can't really get a handle on it because it's something you're trying to change from without by getting this guru or that leader or this book or something else. That's going to change me. I'm going to, after I read that book, I'll be a changed person. You can only change yourself from the inside out. And if you're not doing that, then you're not really making much progress. You're spinning your wheel, you're chasing your tail. But the way to do it is really very simple. And that is you have to have an honest intention to change. Now, there's all kinds of intentions to change. Most of them are intellectual. I want to change because it would make my life better. I'd like to change because, I'd be happy. I'd like to change because all my relationships turn sour. I'd like to change because so you have all these reasons why you'd like to change and why you should change. And that makes you go through the motions of taking this course and that course and reading this book or that book. But what you haven't gotten to is I need to change. I will change. I am going to, you know, act. Not I shouldn't say act, I'm going to be different. It's not about the acting, it's about the being. And if you just have a really sincere desire to be better, you will automatically do just exactly the right things you need to do in order to be better. It'll just solve itself. But, the same thing works with, addictions. If people who smoke cigarettes, if they say, "Well, I know my cigarettes stink. My family doesn't like it. It's a bad habit. I shouldn't do this." So they try to quit. But they're quitting because they think they shouldn't do it. And they'd like to quit, but they're not really committed to changing. They're just committed to having, not being so stinky. They're committed about not being, so abrasive to other people's noses, and they have some good things. They'd like to quit, but they see it as something to do. It's a doing thing. It's not. It's a being thing. So they do all kinds of things. They use patches, they do this, they do that. They have all of these doing things, and sometimes they work, and a lot of times they don't. They'll work for a little while, and the person goes back because they have it at a deep level decided, "I don't wanna smoke anymore. I'm not going to smoke anymore." The end. It's not, "I'd like to do it." I'm going to do it. That's who I am. I'm not a smoker anymore. If they get to that, then they will change, and the most interesting thing is they won't have any discomfort afterwards. There's not going to be withdrawal symptoms. They'll stop, and that'll be the end of it. They'll walk away from it, and they'll never have that urge to go back and, "Oh, here it is, late in the day. I've just had my cup of coffee, and, oh, I really need a cigarette." That feeling that they need that, well, that's the addiction. That's the withdrawal symptom. But once you really decided you're gonna change, you don't have that. That's shut out. That's away. That's not possible. So it doesn't happen. You just walk away from it and you don't have anything dragging at you and pulling at you because you are committed to being this way. Now, that takes a lot of commitment, and many people don't have the ability to commit to an idea like that because they like that feeling of relaxation they get when they take their smoke or when they do whatever they do. It's really, it's developed into a comfort thing. It's developed into a habit. I always smoke just after this or after that. So it's become into habits. And the part of them wants to quit. That's the intellectual part. But there's another part of them that really doesn't want to quit. You know, that's another part of them isn't really on board yet. And that's the part that will drag them down and back and back. So I've had any number of people say that they've quit several different kinds of drug addictions with you know, no withdrawal symptoms at all. Just walk away from it. And in every case, they were just committed and no, I'm not going to do that's not me anymore. So your force of mind is very strong. What happens in the way that works, the way the physics is that when you have an intention, and if that intention is really powerful, which means it's real focused, it really represents you from the being level, you start modifying future probability to give you that thing. So, people call that, manifesting, right? But manifesting is a thing, but people don't know how it works. How it works is that you're modifying future probability. And the way the world works is where there's a choice, where something new is going to happen. The way the system decides, it could be A or it could be B or it could be C. You don't know how this is going to fall out. The way the system decides, it takes a random draw from a probability distribution of the possibilities, and that's what happens. So, if you can change those probabilities, then the probability of you know, becoming a non-smoker, or the probability of you succeeding or growing up or becoming, you know, uh, more a person of love, that probability grows as your intent, as your real deep being level intent focuses on that probability. So you manifest peace, tranquility, love and all that kind of stuff just because that's what you want. But it can't be from your intellect. And the opposite's true too. If you're a fearful person, you create what you fear because you are putting mental energy into that fear. You're frightened of it. Oh, I hope that doesn't happen. Hope that doesn't happen. Well, that raises the probability that that will happen. So, you know, you can raise or lower the probability of what happens next by using your mind. So if you really want the sun to shine next Saturday because your family's planning a picnic, well, if you and all your family really put a lot of effort into it, you can raise the probability that it's going to be sunny that day. On the other hand, if there's a bunch of farmers who really need it to rain and they put a lot of intent into it, well, they're going to raise the probability it's going to rain that day. So we have all of us down here and we're pushing and pulling on things. And whatever happens is, all those forces work themselves out and that's what happens. But for the most part, people don't realize that they have that ability to modify the future probability. So mostly nobody's working on it. So if you are, then often things work out. You got that tight parking situation at work. When you get there, all the places are taken. Oh, if you put some intent on it, about 80% of the time, just as you pull up, somebody will back out and you can get their spot. And that timing works out perfectly. And like I say, about 80% of the time, you'll get a space like that if you can focus your mind, strongly enough on that. But if it's an intellectual thing, oh, I wish I'd find a space. Well, that's very weak. It's not an intellectual. It has to come out of the being level. And most people can come out of the being level better if they're in an altered state of consciousness, if they're meditating, than if they're not. But you don't have to meditate. You can just learn to, work out of your being level. So I don't know. I probably talked too much answering your question, but see, everything is related to everything else. It's not like there's a bunch of different stovepipes. This is how this works. The hell, once you understand the whole thing, it all just falls out. It's the nature of the way things work here.
Yeah, well, and I am telling you, Tom, I could continue this conversation for hours, and so I hope that you will come back on the show because I would love to do I have so many more questions, we've just barely touched the
If
surface.
if you have time, we can go on. I purposely did not have anything just behind this
Oh,
as a hard stop.
yeah, I
So,
have a hard stop because I have to go pick up my grandson from
uh-huh,
school. I
yeah,
wish I not. I have so many things I wanna talk to you about, though, that I would love another opportunity if you're available
yeah.
to schedule
Well,
part 2 with you.
get back with, Mariana, and
Okay.
she's the one that does all my scheduling, so my schedule changes a lot. I'm in a lot of flux right now of things I'm doing,
Yeah.
and the schedule changes, so I need one person that can keep up with all the changes, so that's Mariana, so get back in touch with her, and she'll find a place for you.
Okay. Well, and so just to wrap up the show, though, is there number 1, how can people find out more about you and your work, Tom?
Well, they can, go to my website. That'd be a good place to start, and that's, uh, www.my-big-toe.com. So if you go there, that will point you to all kinds of other places. You can go to my YouTube site. I've got, I don't know, 2,500 videos on YouTube. I've got a lot of videos on YouTube, much more than anybody could possibly stand to listen to, I think, but I've got some search tools so that if you have a particular subject in mind, you can give that subject and it will tell you and give you links to that particular video that talks about that and put you right in the place where I do talk about it. So you can search through those, thousands and thousands of video and come up with just the spots you need. So don't be daunted by the spot. If you're interested in relationships, and I did a whole series of things with Lauria Houston, and they're almost all about relationship from every conceivable angle because this is not only about, science, it's about life. It's
Yeah.
about living. If you're interested in the paranormal, and the paranormal is interesting because, in and of itself, it's not important, but it is a good tool for helping people grow. It helps you find your authentic self. It helps you see bigger pictures. It helps you realize that you're just a little small bitty thing in a great big reality that is stranger than you thought. That provides some humility. And, so doing the paranormal is a good exercises in learning to develop your own mind and your own self, your own presence, and get out of the intellect and into the intuitive side of you. That's real important. The intellect is nice, but the real action is over where the intuitive side is. And I say that as a physicist, that's where the action is over there. So if you're interested in the paranormal, I have a course there called Exploring Reality and All Things Paranormal, Tom Campbell. And I basically teach what the paranormal things are, how they work, what the mechanisms are, and how to use them. And then I give you exercises and say, here's what I want you to do. Go learn it. And you go for an hour listening to binaural beats that I created. And you do it, then you come back and basically you'll hear me answering your questions. Now, it won't be your questions because this is an audio program, but it'll be a compilation of all the questions that were asked after people listened to that tape for something like 20 of these things in brick and mortar places. So I put all the best questions and all the best answers in there. So you'll probably find answers that suit you because most people have very similar kinds of issues and problems. So one at a time, we go through each paranormal thing. I give you a way to try it and come back, ask questions, go back, try it again, come back, ask questions. You do several times for each paranormal thing, mind-to-mind communication, talking to dead people, talking to people who've never been to this reality at all. They're just living out there in the larger consciousness system, going to other reality systems, all those sorts of things. Healing, have a good section on healing. Healing is one of the easiest paranormal things to do because there's so much uncertainty. Your
Mm,
ability to do paranormal things in any particular time has a lot to do with uncertainty and how focused your mind and your intent is, and how and where you're coming from. If you're coming from love or you're coming from some other place. So anyway, you can learn all that. So it's not terrible pricey for a 5-day course. But if you don't want to do it in 5 days, if you do it in 5 days, it's intensive.
mhm,
And you probably learn more because you learn more in intensive learning situations. But if you want to draw that out to 5 weeks or 5 months or 5 years, that's all right. It's there, and you can take it and repeat it as many times as you like. Most people find that when they repeat it even the 10th time, they're still learning a lot of things from it. It takes a while before these things sink in. So that's a thing you can buy, and I have binaural beats there and a lot of other aids to help people experience this reality as consciousness, not as the avatar, but as consciousness. You are a piece of consciousness. You don't have to get out of your body. You're not in your body. You just have to get into your consciousness. And it's really a simpler thing to do than people think. All of the things that prevent you from doing it are all your own things. It's all old habits that you have. You don't have to learn any new skills. You just have to get rid of a bunch of old junk that's in the way. So it's not like it's just a special magical stuff you'll learn. What you'll learn is to get rid of all the junk that is preventing you from having these experiences. These experiences are your birthright. You're a piece of consciousness. You can get data out of that database. Yeah, my model says where that database comes from, why it's there, what date is in it, how it got there, and how do you access it? So that's one of the things I teach in the paranormal course. So if you go to my website, I get that. If you go to the YouTube, you'll find all kinds of stuff. If you're into science, you'll find a whole science section. If you're into relationship, you'll find that. If you're into anything else, you'll discussion any particular subject. And one more thing, I've got an AI there called AI Guy. An AI Guy is actually a character in my books. So AI Guy has been trained on all my stuff. He's watched every one of my videos, all 2,000 of them, and he's, very familiar with the books, and he's excellent. We have tested him many times. The person who's created him, he'd ask me a question, I'd give an answer, and then he'd ask AI Guy the same question and see how the answers differed. And we've done that many times, and I'd say they're generally 98, 99% the same. So if you really like to talk to me and ask me a question, go talk to AI Guy. And if it's about the MBT model and that sort of thing, you're going to get a really good answer. So that's another thing that you can learn. But remember, it's not about intellectually taking in the information. You can read my book 10 times and still not get a thing out of it, not really learn anything. The learning has to be done at a deeper level. So I guess that's the last thing to say. And remember, what we're here for is to become love. That's the point. Always keep that in mind.
beautiful. Tom, thank you so much. Thank you for being here and sharing your light, your love, and your wisdom with all of us.
You're very welcome. That's my job. That's why I'm here. Talk about coming here for a very specific reason. That's that's my job this time. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share it yet with more people.